Church pastor Gary holds a Bible in his right hand, but his left hand is clutching a plan to steal everything I own. He calls me sister while preparing to strip me of my home and my husband's $1.2 million insurance payout. He thinks I'm just a lonely, confused widow who can't see the predator behind the pulpit. He even whispered that I'm too weak to hold this fortune. Little does he know, I've spent my life tracking monsters like him through their bank statements. The trap is set, and he's walking right into it. Listen to the end to hear how I handled it, and subscribe to hear more of my journey. The silver teapot holds his face like a funhouse mirror, all warped cheekbones and that preacher's smile stretched wider than God intended. I keep my eyes down, white hair falling forward the way it always does when I bow my head in prayer, and I watch his hand through the distorted silver surface. His hand is not folded in prayer. It is steady, bone-dry and utterly calm as it slides a document into the leather briefcase beside his chair. The motion is practiced, 2 seconds, no hesitation, the kind of muscle memory that only comes from doing something many, many times before. I note that his sleeve doesn't catch on the clasp. He's used to it. He's good at this. I have been in this business long enough to know that the most dangerous criminals are always the ones with the cleanest hands. Amen, he whispers, and the word lands in my living room like a copper penny dropped on marble. I hear it for what it is, not a closing of prayer, but an opening bid. My pulse holds steady at 65 beats per minute. I spent 40 years sitting across tables from men who cooked books for a living, men who stole the retirement savings of nurses and schoolteachers while their own children slept in $2,000 cribs. I am not frightened of Gary. But I have seen the header on that document, and I know exactly what he is. Notice of incapacity. Adult Protective Services letterhead. My name, Martha Elaine Kowalski, printed in the bold serif font of institutional authority. My husband's $1.2 million life insurance payout listed as a managed asset requiring oversight. He has not come to my home to pray for my soul. He has come to acquire it. I count 4 more seconds of silence. Then I wake up. The tear is perfect. I have practiced it, actually, not in front of a mirror out of vanity, but the way I once practiced a testimony before a federal grand jury. You rehearse until the performance is indistinguishable from the truth. One single tear, tracing the line of my jaw from the corner of my left eye, slow enough to be seen, honest enough to be believed. I blink twice, the disoriented, swimming blink of a woman whose mind is a few beats behind her body. Oh, I murmur softly. I drifted off again. Gary's smile is extraordinary. I will give him that. It reaches his eyes in a way that most people read as warmth, but what I read is calculation, the micro-adjustment of muscles around the orbital socket, a half millimeter too deliberate to be spontaneous. His salt and pepper hair catches the late Florida sun coming through my plantation shutters and it halos him like a Renaissance saint. He has clearly chosen this chair, this angle, with some thought. It's a heavy burden, Martha, he says, and his voice is the kind of voice that fills a room not by volume but by resonance, a baritone that vibrates in the sternum, designed by years of pulpit practice to feel like intimacy even at full projection. Grief exhausts the spirit. You shouldn't be carrying all of this alone. I clutch the collar of my silk cardigan with both hands. I make sure to use my right hand, rotating my wrist slightly outward so the small surgical scar catches the light. I let the tremor come, a fine, feathery shake that I can produce on command after 60-odd years of noticing how people treat a trembling hand differently than a steady one. People talk louder. They explain things twice. They stop guarding their briefcases. You're so kind, I breathe, letting my lips soften into what I call my submission smile, tight-lipped, grateful, slightly glassy. It promises total compliance. It promises that the woman sitting in this velvet armchair is exactly what Gary needs her to be, wealthy, isolated, and gracefully, conveniently failing. He believes it. I can tell by the way his shoulders settle, the almost imperceptible relaxation of a man who has just confirmed that the room is under control. I note this in my internal ledger. His hand comes down on my shoulder like a gavel. It is meant to feel paternal. It is meant to say I am protecting you. What it actually communicates, to me, to my 40 years of reading the body language of white-collar criminals during depositions, is you belong to me now. His gold cross swings forward with the motion, catching the light, and I think, even his jewelry is a prop. The state is a cold machine, sister, he says, leaning in. The smell of him reaches me, expensive pomade, something vaguely cedar, and underneath it the faint metallic tang of a cologne that probably costs $400 an ounce and still smells aggressive. They see a woman alone, they see vulnerability. They want to appoint a stranger, some court-assigned guardian who doesn't know you, doesn't love you, to manage your husband's legacy. He says your husband's legacy the way a man says the weather. Casually. As though it is simply context, not the entire point of his presence in my living room. The hand on my shoulder tightens, just slightly. Just enough to be felt. Not enough to be reported. The $1.2 million, he continues, his voice dropping to a register of practiced concern, is an enormous responsibility for someone navigating grief. Someone in your condition. Without the right guidance, it becomes a target. His voice implies. His protection is implied. His fee is not yet disclosed, but I have already calculated the approximate range from the documentation he thinks I didn't see. This is a squeeze play. Textbook. Manufacture the threat, position yourself as the shield, collect the toll for standing between your victim and the monster you invented. I saw it in my first year at the Bureau when a mortgage broker in Naperville was running the same game on elderly homeowners. He was also charming. He also had nice hair. He also got 12 years at Allenwood. I breathe through the weight of Gary's hand on my shoulder, and I wait. The iPhone lights up on the end table. Even from across the room I can read the notification banner, Leo. Mom, haven't heard from you. I reach for it. I make the reach look like what it is, a reflex, a mother's instinct, a woman responding to her son's name on a screen. I let my fingers fumble on the edge of the table the way fingers do when the fine motor control isn't quite what it used to be. Gary's hand is faster. His thick fingers come down on the device and pin it to the wood with the casual, zero hesitation motion of a man who has done this before. Who does this routinely? Who has developed a whole philosophy to explain why he is allowed to stand between a mother and her son? Not now, Martha. The spiritual warmth in his voice doesn't crack, not even slightly. The world's noise only disrupts the spirit's work. You need peace. You need stillness. He slides my phone into his jacket pocket. The motion takes perhaps 1.5 seconds. The magnetic snap of the pocket closing sounds, in the silence of my living room, like something final. I've spoken to the children, he continues, and the ease in his voice makes my stomach move with cold recognition. They understand you're on a kind of spiritual retreat. Processing. Resting. They respect that. He pauses. Though I'll say, and I share this only because I care for you, they seemed more concerned with the estate than with your well-being. But that's between them and God. They just want what's fair from the estate. He lets the sentence land and then smiles, warm and sorry, as though he has reluctantly delivered a painful truth out of love. I look at the empty table where my phone was and let my face arrange itself into the expression of a woman who has just been told that the people she loves most have quietly, privately betrayed her. It is not a difficult expression to manufacture, because the fury behind it is entirely real, only the target of the fury is different than he thinks. He is cutting the lines. One by one. Systematic, methodical, efficient. I note his technique with professional appreciation even as I note his crimes. He rises from the chair and his body changes the room. Gary is not a tall man, perhaps 5'10", but he is stocky and deliberate in his movements, and he commands space the way men who have always been listened to tend to command it. He moves through my living room with the studied casualness of a man who believes he is already its owner. "Such a beautiful collection," he says, and picks up the silver cream pitcher to examine the hallmark on the base. Sets it down. Moves to the mahogany desk and runs 2 fingers along the edge, testing the grain the way an appraiser might. Lifts the heavy glass paperweight with the marine insignia and turns it over once. He pauses longest at my husband's shadow box. It hangs between the windows, positioned so that the afternoon light falls across it just so, my deliberate choice, the day I hung it, so that the Purple Heart would catch the sun at 4 o'clock and glow like the thing it is. 43 years of marriage. A man who came home from places he wouldn't speak of and still managed to teach Sunday school and coach Little League and die with his honor completely, absolutely intact. Gary's thick finger traces the edge of the folded flag. "Such a waste," he says softly, "for these things to sit in a dusty house." He says it to himself, almost. As though he is thinking aloud. As though I am not in the room, or am not capable of registering the insult carried in those particular words at this particular moment. I register it. I register every syllable, and I add it to the column I am building in my mind, a column that I will call, when this is over, Evidence of Character, and which will be complete before the week is out. "I'd love another cup, if you don't mind," Gary says, settling back into the velvet armchair with the proprietary ease of a man at his own kitchen table. "These afternoon visits restore me." "Of course," I say. I move to the desk first. My gait is slow and careful, the cane making its familiar soft percussion on the hardwood, and I feel his eyes follow me for 3 seconds before they drift to his phone. Good. 3 seconds is what I need. I open my leather-bound ledger. It is a beautiful object, 8 by 12 inches, Florentine binding, the paper a cream-colored stock with a weight and tooth that I chose specifically because it takes ink without bleeding. Gary has seen it many times. He has made gentle, condescending remarks about how sweet it is that I keep a diary. He believes it contains confused fragments, grocery lists, repeated notes about doctor's appointments, the scattered debris of a deteriorating mind. It does not contain those things. The moment the cover rises and shields my hands from his line of sight, the tremor stops. Not gradually. Instantly. The way a signal clears when interference is removed. My right hand is perfectly, surgically steady as I uncap my pen. I have essential tremor, it is a real condition, and I do not pretend otherwise. But it is most pronounced when I am tired or when I permit it to be, and for the past several weeks I have been investing tremendous care in permitting it. In curating it. In making it perform for an audience of one. I write 3 things, the document ID number I memorized from the APS filing. The hallmark stamp I read off the bottom of the cream pitcher. A 6-digit notation that is, to anyone else, meaningless. I am no longer a grieving widow in a velvet-furnished living room. I am a senior forensic auditor with a case file and a subject who has severely underestimated the infrastructure of the woman he believes he is dismantling. I close the ledger. I pick up the cane. I turn to the tea cart with my trembling hands, the performance resuming as smoothly as a recording. The numbers never lie. And Gary's numbers are deeply, profoundly in the red. He is checking his phone when I study the document. He left his briefcase on the side table when he went to look at the shadow box, and the document has shifted, slid forward just enough during transit that the top quarter is visible beneath the flap. He did not notice. Men like Gary do not notice the details they consider beneath them. I do not move toward it. I look at it from my chair, with the undramatic focus of a woman who knows better than to call attention to what she has found. The letterhead is good. At a glance, at a distance, it reads as authentic APS, Adult Protective Services, Florida Department of Children and Families, the full bureaucratic weight of institutional language deployed in service of a fiction. But the font is wrong. Not wildly, not cartoonishly, wrong by the amount that only matters if you are looking, and if you know what to look for. The kerning on the seal is 2 points off. The serifs on the agency name are from a desktop publishing template that has been circulating in forgery communities since at least 2019. I know this because I flagged it in an advisory I wrote for a multi-state elder fraud task force the year before I retired. He used a template I helped identify. There is a document ID number printed in the lower right corner. I have already memorized it. It does not exist in any APS database. I will verify this later, but I already know. Ghost file. Digital phantom, exactly the kind of manufactured paper trail that looks devastating in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to authenticate it and is meaningless the moment someone does. My pulse is 65 beats per minute. This is not a crisis. This is an audit. And I have just found the first irregularity. Oh dear, I say, and tip the teacup. It is precise. I have been calculating angles since I stood up from the desk, and I know exactly how much wrist rotation, applied at what moment during the pour, will send a full cup of Earl Grey in a controlled arc onto the lap of a bespoke navy suit without scalding anyone badly enough to require medical attention. I am not trying to burn him. I am trying to access his briefcase. The tea hits his trousers and Gary comes out of the chair making a sound that is almost, a profanity, swallowed at the last second by the muscle memory of a man who cannot afford to be seen swearing in front of his congregation. I am so sorry, Pastor. I flutter. I press my hands to my mouth. I let my eyes go wide and liquid and mortified. My nerves, I don't know what's gotten into me today, I'm just the shaking, it's been worse. He looks at me. For 1/2 second, the mask is entirely gone. What replaces it is not anger exactly, it is contempt, clean and cold and completely unguarded, the expression of a man regarding an object that has malfunctioned. Then the mask returns, smooth and seamless, and he smiles with strained patience. It's all right, Martha. These things happen. Let me he gestures toward the hallway. Your guest bath? Second door on the right, I say, my voice appropriately crumbling with guilt. I hear his footsteps cross the hall. I hear the bathroom door. The click of the light switch. The rush of water from the faucet. Then I stand up. The fluidity of my own movement still surprises me, on days when I've forgotten to perform the stiffness for anyone's benefit. My body remembers 30 years of morning runs and a decade of Tai Chi and the general stubbornness of a woman who has never believed that aging was something that happened to her rather than with her. I cross the room in 4 steps. I reach into my cardigan pocket and produce my reading glasses, the pair with the thicker left temple. The microlens embedded there is not something I bought at a spy shop or acquired through dramatic means. I requisitioned it through a colleague in the Bureau's technical division approximately 8 years ago, before I retired, and I have maintained it out of the same habit that makes me keep a backup copy of every tax document I have ever filed. You never know when an audit will require documentation. The briefcase latch opens without a sound. He left it unlocked, a detail that tells me everything I need to know about how seriously Gary takes the possibility that his victims will act. 3 images, 30 seconds of silent shutter clicks, the forged APS filing in full. A legal pad with handwritten notes, a column of names with dollar amounts beside them. A printed routing number with a Cayman Islands bank code that I recognize by its structure. I hear the faucet cut off. I close the briefcase, return to my chair, and arrange the pashmina across my knees with the unhurried movements of a woman who has been sitting quietly the whole time. The bathroom door opens. I look up from my lap, blinking mildly, the picture of innocent vacancy. He returns with damp hands and diminished patience. The honeyed warmth is thinner now, stretched over something harder that is beginning to show through the way an old repair shows through new paint when the temperature changes. He dabs at his trousers with a folded paper towel. He looks at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that has caused you an inconvenience. Perhaps, he says, and his voice is very careful, a residential facility would suit you better, Martha. He lets the word sit. Facility. Not home. Not community. Facility, the word with the institutional weight he needs me to feel. Somewhere they can manage your accidents. He sets the paper towel on the side table, on my side table, in my living room, and picks up his briefcase with a crisp, decisive snap of the latches. The sound is metallic and final. A cell door in miniature. He looks at me. Not the way a pastor looks at a grieving widow. The way an administrator looks at a case file. I look back at him over the rim of my empty teacup. My expression is the one I have cultivated most carefully over these past weeks, vacant, frightened, eager to be reassured. It is a masterpiece of understatement. Below it, I am running an assessment the way I once ran assessments on the executives I was brought in to audit, the ones who had lawyers present and said nothing incriminating and still couldn't hide the fundamental structure of who they were, because people never can, not entirely, not from someone who knows where to look. Narcissism, extreme, and brittle at the edges. He needs me to be confused so he can feel sharp. He needs me to be grateful so he can feel generous. He needs, above all things, to be the most intelligent person operating in any given situation, which means he has never developed a serious plan for what to do when he isn't. He has been running this game on elderly widows and widowers for years. I have seen his type before, not pastors, always, but the same fundamental architecture. The same hunger for the sense of superior intelligence that comes from tricking people who trust you. The same catastrophic blind spot, they only know how to beat people who don't know the rules. He has never audited a forensic accountant. He has never sat in a room with a woman who can trace a wire transfer through 3 shell companies while discussing the weather. He has never, in any of his considerable experience as a predator, made the mistake of walking into the home of a woman who has been waiting for exactly him. I find the entry point clearly, cleanly, the way I always do. His ego is the door. His certainty is the lock. And I have had the key since approximately 11 minutes into this visit. You're right, Gary. I let my voice soften to something just above a whisper. I let my lip do the small quiver, the one that costs me nothing because the anger underneath is real and enormous and has nowhere to go yet, and the quiver is simply the pressure finding a hairline crack. I reach out and touch his sleeve with my trembling hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. I look up at him, and I put into my eyes everything I have spent my career training myself not to show: helplessness, gratitude, the naked relief of a woman who has been afraid for a long time and has finally found someone willing to carry the weight. My husband always said I had no head for the books. I was always so dependent on him for the practical things. I feel Gary's arm beneath my fingers go very slightly, very subtly rigid. He is trying not to move toward the triumph too quickly. Trying to look humble. Losing. I'll sign whatever you think is best to keep the state away, I whisper. Please. Just don't let them take me from my home. The triumph flares in his eyes. I see it clearly, a hot, dopamine brightness, the specific satisfaction of a man who has just confirmed his own theory of himself. He has won. He knew he would win. He has always known he would win because men like Gary believe the universe is organized around their victory. He pats my hand. We'll get through this together, he says, warm and pastorally and completely sincere in his insincerity. I smile up at him with trembling gratitude, and behind my eyes, behind the steel blue gaze that he reads as clouded with age and grief, I am doing what I have done every single day of my working life. I am closing the books. Gary believes the trap has snapped shut around my ankle. He has not yet noticed that the trap is mine. That I built it before he arrived. That the remote in my cardigan pocket, beside the reading glasses with the micro lens, is waiting for a moment I have already chosen, for a wire I have already planned, for an audience Gary has not yet considered. He will. But not today. Today he leaves my house satisfied, tucking my phone into his jacket pocket, rolling my husband's insurance payout around his mind like a stone in his mouth. Today, I let him. The audit has begun. She arrives the way bad news always arrives, without apology, without preamble, on the heels of a man who has already decided how the room will be arranged. Gary ushers her through my front door with the proprietary ease of a landlord showing a property, one broad hand at the small of her back, the other gesturing grandly at the space as though he is presenting it to her rather than invading it. "This is Elena," he announces, his baritone filling the foyer with forced warmth, "a private nurse from the ministry. She's here to ensure you don't," a weighted pause, a glance at the tea cart, "hurt yourself again." Elena does not smile. Elena, I think, has not smiled in quite some time. She is tall and lean in a way that reads as efficiency rather than health, dressed in scrubs the color of a February sky over Chicago, flat gray, institutional, designed to communicate authority rather than care. Her eyes move across my living room in 2 seconds flat, the silver service, the mahogany desk, the shadow box, the windows, the exits. It is the visual sweep of a woman taking inventory, not of a woman taking in a new patient. She does not offer me her hand. She offers me a clipboard. I take it with both trembling hands, bending forward to read the top line with the exaggerated squint of a woman who has misplaced her glasses, and in that 3-second window I read what I need to read, the agency name, printed in crisp sans serif at the header. Lakeview Care Services, LLC. I know that name. Not from the yellow pages. From a 2014 brief I co-authored for a multi-state task force on elder care fraud, a brief that identified 3 shell companies operating under rotating LLCs as conduits for Medicare billing fraud. Lakeview was in the second tier, the administrative layer. It was dissolved in 2016, or appeared to be. The nurse is not a nurse. My home has just become a controlled environment. How wonderful, I say to the clipboard, and let my voice carry the particular tremolo of a woman deeply, deeply relieved to no longer be alone. Elena moves through my house the way water moves, finding the lowest point, the path of least resistance, utterly without hesitation. She clicks the deadbolt on the front door before Gary has finished taking off his jacket. She moves to the back door. Click. The kitchen window latch. Click. Every sound precise and spaced, like a metronome counting down. "For your safety, Martha," she says, and her voice is a flat, informational monotone, the kind of voice that has learned to deliver unpleasant things without inflection, so that the unpleasantness appears to be simply the nature of reality rather than a choice. She reaches the kitchen and, without asking, takes the house keys from the hook by the door. She wraps her hand around them. My hand reaches up in an automatic reflex, fingers closing on the ring, and she removes them from my grip with a smooth, practiced motion, the way you take scissors from a child. Then she pulls the landline from the kitchen wall. The cord comes free with a soft tearing sound, and the copper wire hangs from the baseboard like a severed nerve. I stand and watch it. I allow my face to perform the expression of a woman watching something foundational and irreversible happen to her world. It is not entirely a performance. She returns to the kitchen table and sets down a glass of water and a small white tablet. "Your supplements," she says, and the word supplements is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. I pick up the tablet. I look at it. I look at her. I bring it to my lips with the compliant, good patient gesture of a woman who has stopped asking questions, and in the motion of lifting the water glass I fold the tablet into the cuff of my silk sleeve with the pad of my thumb. Mild sedative. Almost certainly. The texture is wrong for a vitamin, compressed powder with a faint pharmaceutical bitterness I can smell without swallowing. I catalogued it in half a second. I drink the water. I set the glass down. I look at Elena with wide, watery eyes, the expression of a woman who is grateful to be taken care of, who has given the management of her body over to someone else because her grip on it is failing. Elena looks back at me with the professionally neutral face of a woman who is not thinking about me at all. Good. That is exactly what I need. Gary settles me on the sofa with the deliberate ceremony of a man staging a scene. He sits beside me, closer than is comfortable, the physical proximity another form of control, and tilts his iPad toward my face. The video begins. It is grainy. The framing is slightly wrong, a fraction of a degree off from how a person would actually hold a phone to record themselves, as though it was cropped from a wider shot. In it, my son Leo sits at what appears to be the table from our last family brunch, his face flushed, his voice raised. We just need the payout. The house is a money pit anyway. My chest does something involuntary and painful. Maternal instinct is not a metaphor, it is a physical event, a contraction that happens below the level of thought. I feel it before I can stop it, a visceral sting behind my sternum, the specific grief of hearing your child's voice weaponized against you. And then my forensic brain catches up. The audio artifacts are there if you know how to listen, a slight overcompression on the consonants, the cadence a half beat off from Leo's natural speech pattern. He has always talked slightly faster than average, a childhood habit he never outgrew, and whoever created this recording has smoothed it out to a normative pace. There is a frame rate inconsistency between the first and second halves of the clip, barely perceptible, the kind of seam you get when you splice two recordings. Deep fake, or a heavily edited composite. Possibly both. I know this. I know this completely, with the clean certainty of a 40-year career. I let my lip tremble anyway, because Gary is watching my face, and what he needs to see is the poison landing. He sighs, a long, theatrical exhalation of shared sorrow, the sigh of a man who has reluctantly witnessed the worst of human nature. They're already dividing the spoils, Martha. Only the church truly cares for the soul. I look at the screen. I look at his face. I press my hand to my mouth. Leo, I whisper, and let the name break. Gary pats my knee with solemn satisfaction. The manila folder comes out of his briefcase with the particular deliberateness of a man who has saved his best move for the right moment. Arthur was a hero, Gary begins. His voice drops. It becomes something intimate and sorrowing, the voice of a man confiding something he wishes he didn't have to say. He opens the folder and lays out a series of documents, military records, some photocopied, some printed, all stamped with what appears to be official government formatting. But heroes have shadows. He points to a cluster of redacted dates. Vietnam, 1968. Logistics. Material transfers. The language of the notations is bureaucratic and vague, as government language always is, and in that vagueness there is enormous room for interpretation, which is, of course, entirely the point. I have documents suggesting he misappropriated government property. If this reaches the VA, the investigation would freeze the pension payments. And if they can demonstrate the insurance was tied to the same accounts, he lets the sentence end itself. I look at the documents. I look at Arthur's name, printed there, Staff Sergeant Arthur J. Vance. The name on his dog tags, which I am carrying in my cardigan pocket against my sternum, as I have every day since the funeral. The thing about a threat to the dead is that it is designed to be unanswerable. You cannot call Arthur to testify. You cannot ask him to explain. You can only sit across from a man who claims to hold the evidence of your husband's dishonor and make a choice about what you are willing to pay to keep it buried. This is the masterwork of Gary's cruelty. He has found the one lever that operates below reason. My children, I can protect. My finances, I can restructure. My own safety, I have managed since the first afternoon he sat in my living room. Arthur's name is different. Arthur is the thing I cannot audit. I close my eyes for 3 seconds. I open them. What would I need to do? I ask, and my voice is barely there, and the grief in it is real, not because I believe a single word in that folder, but because I know what it cost Gary to make it, and the cost is a measure of how much he is willing to destroy. He leans forward with a gentle, satisfied smile. Let me show you, he says. He lays the promissory notes out on the dining table like a hand of cards. They are backdated across 7 years. Each one bears Arthur's signature, or what purports to be it, in a fountain pen ink of a deep, blued black that is close to the color Arthur used but not quite right, the pigment reads warmer than it should in this light, a detail I note without expression. The amounts climb, 15,000, 40,000, 80,000, totaling in aggregate something north of $300,000 allegedly owed by my husband to the Ministry for Spiritual Counsel and Estate Guidance. Gary writes as I watch. He works with the focused concentration of a craftsman, his thick hand moving with surprising lightness. He captures the slight hitch in the capital V, the way Arthur always overextended the downstroke before curling up into the rest of the letter, a quirk that developed in his 50s when the arthritis in his right index finger changed the way he held a pen. I only know this because I watched Arthur sign his name 10,000 times over 43 years of marriage. Gary knows it because he has studied the signature from documents he has no legitimate access to. "I'm just helping you fulfill his final wishes, Martha," he says, not looking up. The pen moves. Arthur J. Vance. Arthur J. Vance. He was worried about you. He wanted to know you'd be protected. I watch every stroke. The pressure of the nib, the angle of the wrist, the spacing between letters. I memorize the ink color against the white of the paper. I note the watermark on the promissory note forms, a commercial brand available at any office supply store, not government issue. Every observation goes into the internal ledger. What is happening at this table is not a financial transaction. It is a desecration. And I treat desecrations the way I treat all crimes, with perfect, cold documentation. Take the silver and the desk, Elena. The pastoral voice is completely gone now. What replaces it is a foreman's voice, short, flat, organized around efficiency. He is on a schedule, and performance is no longer useful enough to justify the energy expenditure. Elena begins wrapping the silver service in bubble wrap she has apparently brought with her, already prepared, the rolls of it emerging from a large tote bag I didn't see her carry in. The sound is extraordinary in the quiet of my living room, each bubble a small, compressed pop, dozens of them, like a distant field of small arms fire. The sound of my husband's wedding anniversary gift to me, his mother's silver service that came over from Poland in 1923, being prepared for resale. I sit in my armchair. I let my face go to the place it needs to go, vacant sorrow, the expression of a woman watching water drain from a basin, unable to stop it, barely able to track it. Gary moves to the mahogany desk. The desk where my father taught me to balance a checkbook at age 9, where Arthur signed his will, where I wrote every report I ever filed. I count the items as they box them. Silver service, resale value approximately $12,000 through a reputable auction house, less if Gary's people are moving through pawn channels, which they likely are. Mahogany desk, 8 to 14,000. The glassware on the sideboard, 3,000. They are stripping approximately $25,000 of value from this room, and they will net perhaps 40% of that through whatever channels they're using, and the remainder will be laundered through ministry operating accounts. I know this because I have seen this exact financial structure before. 3 times. In cases I closed. I watch Elena fold the bubble wrap around my husband's things, and I do not allow my face to show the specific, white-hot fury of a woman who has decided that Gary is going to be the most comprehensively documented case of elder financial exploitation in the state of Florida. It is simply a matter of waiting for the right tools. "Let me help," I say, rising from the chair. Elena looks at Gary. Gary shrugs, the shrug of a man who sees no threat in a trembling 72-year-old woman who wants to feel useful while her life is being packed into boxes. Elena steps aside and hands me the meat platter. It is heavy, solid silver, 17 inches. The engraving on the face a floral design that Arthur chose because he said it looked like the wild roses his mother used to grow in the yard in Ohio. My hands shake as I receive it. The shake is genuine this time. The platter is heavier than I remember, or I am more tired than I have been allowing myself to notice. I turn, angling my body so my back is to Elena, my face is toward the window, and my hands are in the only position in the room where neither of them can see both my palms simultaneously. The sewing needle is in my left palm. I positioned it there 20 minutes ago, worked it from the seam of my cardigan lining where I have kept it for the past week, waiting for a moment that required it. I press the tip of the needle against the soft silver underside of the platter, and I etch. The motion is minimal and controlled, a 7, then a dash, then my 8-digit FBI badge number. The characters are 2 millimeters tall, applied with enough pressure to create a shallow groove in the silver that will read clearly under a jeweler's loupe but is invisible to the unaided eye in normal lighting. I apply the last digit and curl my fingers closed around the underside, the needle receding into my palm. The tip of the needle catches the pad of my index finger. I feel the sting, feel the small heat of blood. I feel nothing else. Not sentimentality. Not pain beyond the physical. I feel the clean, cold satisfaction of a woman who has just turned her stolen property into marked evidence, who has transformed her husband's heirlooms from targets into instruments. Every item that leaves this house is now an extension of the audit. I hand the platter to Elena with shaking hands, my eyes watery and distant, and she wraps it in bubble wrap without looking at my face. I am in the hallway, leaning on my cane, when I hear the sound of pages turning. Elena is in my study. The door is 3 inches ajar, not enough for her to see the hallway, enough for me to see her, gloved hands, moving with practiced efficiency through the journal I left on the desk. Not reading so much as scanning, running her eyes down each page the way you scan for specific terms rather than meaning. She is looking for account numbers. Passwords. Evidence that I am more operationally coherent than I am supposed to be. She will not find them. What she will find is 47 pages of careful, deliberate confusion, repeated grocery lists with items crossed out and re-added, partial diary entries that stop mid-sentence, a page of phone numbers where 3 digits of each are transposed, an elaborate catalog of dreams recorded with the earnest, scattered energy of a woman who has perhaps too much time and too little clarity. I constructed it over 6 days. It is, I think, some of the best work I have done in a long time. I pushed the study door open with the unsteady caution of a woman who wasn't sure which room she was looking for. Elena turns immediately, her expression cycling through 3 things in less than a second: surprise, calculation, and then the performed warmth of a professional caught doing something entirely ordinary. "Just tidying up, Martha," she says. "You really should keep your affairs in order." I look at the desk. I look at her. I let my brow furrow with the gentle, confused hurt of a woman who isn't sure what is happening but knows that something is, and doesn't quite have the resources to address it. Then I shuffle back toward the hallway, cane tapping. The real ledger is taped to the underside of the kitchen sink, between the cold water pipe and the cabinet wall, wrapped in a waterproof sleeve I fashioned from a freezer bag. It has been there for 4 days. Elena can tidy as much as she likes. Tell them you're safe. Gary holds his phone 6 inches from my face. The recording application is open, the waveform pulsing in the silence, waiting. I do not speak immediately. I let the silence extend, 5 seconds, 8 seconds, and I watch Gary's jaw tighten by increments, the muscle below his ear flexing once, twice. He reaches out and his thumb presses into the inside of my left forearm, finding the bruise that Elena left yesterday during the vitamin struggle with a precision that I choose to believe is accidental and know is not. The pressure is specific and deliberate. "Speak," the thumb says. "Now." I begin, and let my voice fracture in the middle of the first syllable. I'm where I need to be. A breath. The pastor is taking care of everything. The word everything I deliver with a slightly longer duration on the first syllable than natural speech would require. A fractional emphasis, barely audible. The kind of thing that registers only if you have been listening for it your whole life. 27 years ago, when Leo was 9 and Sarah was 6 and Arthur was overseas for 3 months in a posting we couldn't discuss, I taught them a word game. A family cipher, Arthur's idea. He had a handler's instinct for contingencies. If I ever said everything in a certain way, it meant, something is completely wrong and I am not free to say so. Pay attention. Get help. This is a full audit. We played it as a game for years. We never needed it. I pray, now, that Leo remembers. Gary smiles and hits send, satisfied with the recording the way a man is satisfied with a document that serves his purposes, and I breathe slowly through the burning in my forearm, and I count. Elena goes to shower at 11:15. I know this because she has maintained the same schedule for 3 nights. Lights out at 10:45, shower at 11:15, duration approximately 12 minutes. People with military or institutional backgrounds tend toward rigid personal routines. It is one of the ways you can read training in a person's habits. I wait in the dark of my bedroom for 11 minutes after I hear the water start. Then I move. The kitchen is silver gray in the ambient light coming through the window over the sink. I know this room by touch regardless. 40 years of pre-dawn tea making, navigating by the particular geography of a kitchen that I chose, that I arranged, that fits my movements like a tailored garment. I find the bread box by feel and ease it open. Elena's personal phone is there, exactly where I saw her place it during the afternoon. It is a newer model than the ministry-issued device she carries openly, slimmer, with a camera upgrade that speaks to someone who wants high-resolution documentation capability. Next to it is a brooch. Small, silver, a fine lattice design with what appears to be a decorative pin clasp, the kind of piece that could belong to any woman of a certain age, on any shelf in any house in any retirement community in Florida. Unremarkable to anyone who hasn't spent time around the Bureau's technical division in the last decade of their career. To me, it is immediately and completely recognizable. It is a transmitter. High-end, private security grade. Extended broadcast range, channel selectable, voice activated. The kind of device that does not appear on any ministry supply list. There is a note folded beneath it, small and precise, written on the flyleaf torn from a paperback novel. Channel 4. Wait for the signal. I stand in my dark kitchen holding a silver brooch and a forward note, and I allow myself, for exactly 3 seconds, to feel the thing I have not permitted myself to feel since this began. Relief. Partial, provisional, hard-won. I am not alone in this house. Elena is not Gary's asset. Or she is not only Gary's asset. The nurse is a leak in the hull of his operation, and the brooch in my hand is the proof. I fold the note. I tuck the brooch into my cardigan pocket, next to Arthur's dog tags, next to the needle, next to the universe of small instruments by which I am disassembling a man who thought he was airtight. I go back to my bedroom. I do not sleep for some time, but this time it is not from fear. At 2 a.m, by the light of a penlight held between my teeth, I retrieve the real ledger from beneath the sink. I open it to the first blank page. The Vigenère cipher is a 16th-century encryption method I taught to bureau trainees for 11 years. It is elegant precisely because it appears, to the uninitiated, to produce only nonsense, columns of letters that bear no surface resemblance to the information they contain. I use a key word only I know, Arthur's mother's maiden name, which appears in no document Gary has touched, and I begin to encode. My husband's pension account routing numbers become a shopping list. Federal case file numbers become dairy purchases. The channel frequency of the brooch transmitter, 4, becomes a reminder about eggs. My handwriting in the ledger is small, precise, and perfectly slanted. The tremor is gone. In this kitchen, in this dark, with this particular work, I am not 72 years old or a grieving widow or a woman whose home has been occupied by a predator who calls himself a pastor. I am who I have always been. The work is methodical and absorbing, and when I finish 2 hours later, I sit with the ledger closed in my lap and I think about Arthur. About the specific quality of his silence when he was working through something difficult, a warm, inhabited quiet, the silence of a person rather than an absence. About the way he used to say you see things other people miss, Marty, and mean it as a love letter. The numbers never lie, I think, and close the ledger. In the morning, Gary finds me in the armchair. I have spent 20 minutes on the preparation, hair slightly mussed on the left side, the journal open face down on my lap as though it slid from sleeping hands, my body arranged in the slack, unguarded posture of a woman who has stopped managing the impression she makes. My mouth hangs very slightly open. When Gary speaks, I let his words travel into the room and sit there for 10 full seconds before I turn my head toward him with the glacial slowness of a woman who has had to travel a long distance to get back to the present moment. Gary? My voice is thin, and bewildered, and small. He looks at me. A long look, assessing, reading the body language with the practiced eye of a man who needs to know how compliant his asset is before he can proceed to the next phase. The numbers won't stay still, I whisper. I let my eyes slide toward the middle distance and hold there, focused on nothing. He laughs. It is a genuine laugh, not the performed warmth of the baritone, but something uglier and more honest that escapes before the professional mask can catch it, the laugh of a man who has just confirmed his victory, who has watched the last resistance crumble on schedule. A sound of absolute, transparent satisfaction. He turns and makes a small, decisive gesture to Elena. Elena moves toward the hall closet where the deed transfer papers have been waiting. I sit in my armchair with my mouth slightly open and my eyes fixed on the middle distance, and I am the most alert I have been in 72 years of living. Every circuit firing, every instrument calibrated, every variable accounted for in the ledger that only I can read. Broken. Ready. Compliant. The most dangerous thing in this room. The audit has not concluded. It has merely reached the phase where the examiner sets down the pen and allows the subject to believe they have been cleared, the moment right before the door opens and the marshals walk in. Gary does not know this phase exists. He is about to learn. The tea has been cold for an hour. I know this because I have been nursing the same cup since 6:15, sitting at the kitchen island with the ledger closed in front of me and the brooch in my cardigan pocket and Arthur's dog tags against my sternum, performing the particular stillness of a woman who has run out of thoughts to think. Elena moves around the kitchen in her efficient, soundless way. She checks the cabinet above the refrigerator. She wipes down the counter that is already clean. She is performing occupation of space the way I am performing vacancy of mind. Then her hand comes down over mine on the countertop. I go rigid, a genuine, involuntary response that I cannot quite suppress, the body's protest against unexpected contact, against another person's hand arriving without announcement. Elena doesn't squeeze. Her grip is flat, anchoring, a hand that is communicating stay rather than stop. Martha. Her voice is barely above a breath. Look at me. I look at her. The clinical mask is gone. What replaces it is a face I haven't seen on her before, sharp and focused and quietly urgent, the face of a person working under conditions that require precision. Her eyes are brown and very direct, the eyes of someone who has been watching carefully for a long time and has decided that the window for observation is now closed. I'm not ministry, she says. The words arrive simply, without drama, and for a long moment they sit in the kitchen between us without landing anywhere. I am aware that there are cameras, Gary installed two, I have identified their positions, they cover the kitchen and the hallway, and I keep my face in the register of mild, bewildered attention while my chest performs something I can only describe as a controlled detonation. I'm with a private firm, Elena continues, her voice against the ambient sound of the refrigerator, too quiet for the camera's microphones at this range. Arthur's old unit commissioned us when the activity on your accounts hit a federal risk threshold. High-value transfers initiated through third-party ecclesiastical proxies. The algorithm flagged it in March. Arthur's unit. My hand, under hers, is perfectly still. She tells me what she can tell me in 90 seconds. Gary has been under active surveillance for 11 months. 4 other victims identified across 3 states. The firm has the financial trail, shell companies, offshore routing, the whole architecture, but federal prosecution requires a primary witness present at the moment of the wire transfer. Someone who can testify to the coercion in real time, from inside the room. Someone, in other words, like me. We needed you to hold on, she says, and there is something in the directness of her voice that tells me this is not a woman who apologizes for operational necessity. I know what the last week has been. I breathe once, slowly, through my nose. The relief is a physical event. I feel it move through my chest the way warmth moves through a room when the heat finally comes on. Real. Involuntary. Enormous. My face does not move. I understand, I say, and the two words come out in Martha the widow's thin, vacant voice, because the cameras are still running, and the audit is not yet closed. Elena gives my hand a single, firm press. Then she picks up her clipboard and makes a note, the caring professional resuming her rounds, and I look back at my cold cup of tea, and I think, Arthur, you old handler. Even now. She leans in as if to check my pulse, 2 fingers at the inside of my wrist, the gesture of clinical routine, and in the lean, she slides the brooch into my palm. The metal is cool and lighter than I expected, for something that contains that much capability. I close my fingers around it and feel the lattice pattern press into my palm, raised silver wire in a pattern of interlocking diamonds, the kind of decorative work you find in estate jewelry, unremarkable to anyone who hasn't spent time in the technical division of a federal law enforcement agency. Dual purpose, Elena breathes, her face 6 inches from mine, her eyes on the pulse point at my wrist. Transmitter and short-range jammer. Once it's pinned, we're live. The team is 3 blocks out, florist van, channel 4. A pause. We'll hear everything. I feel the dog tags against my sternum, and I feel the brooch in my palm, and for a moment these 2 objects, one that belonged to the man who built my life and one that will end the man trying to dismantle it, exist in the same moment, the same hand, the same purpose. I give Elena one nod. Small, precise, the nod of a woman confirming a number. She sits back. Records a blood pressure that I am certain she has invented. The audit has graduated from a desk operation to a field operation. I tuck the brooch into my cardigan pocket, nest it against the dog tags, and pick up my tea. The door hits the wall. Gary does not open doors, he arrives through them, a fact of his physical presence and his psychological orientation, the entrance always a statement of ownership. He fills the kitchen doorway in his bespoke navy suit, his salt and pepper hair swept back, and behind him trails a man in a cheap gray suit carrying a black leather case with the compression marks of a portable notary seal kit. Time for the final blessing, Martha, Gary says. The honeyed baritone is gone. What remains is a production voice, loud, declarative, calibrated for a room he has already decided he controls, but stripped of its spiritual register. He is not performing warmth anymore. He is performing authority, which is a different costume entirely. He moves to the mahogany table and drops the papers the way a man drops car keys, the gesture of ownership made visible. Deed transfer, insurance authorization, the $1.2 million payout documentation that represents Arthur's 40 years of military service and the premium payments we made with disciplined regularity for 2 decades after he retired, because Arthur believed in leaving things in order. The children are calling again, Gary says. They're getting litigious. He makes the words sound like a disease. We need to move these assets into the church's trust before the lawyers freeze everything. He checks his phone, a reflexive glance, the habit of a man who is managing multiple timelines simultaneously. We're burning daylight. Under the kitchen lights, which are less forgiving than the warm lamplight of the living room where he is usually careful to position himself, Gary's artificial tan reads orange. There is a slight sheen at his temple that is not from the Florida heat, which has been the same ambient temperature since he walked in. His hand, when it sets the papers down, releases them a half-second too quickly. He is in the burn phase. The place in a long con where patience has been fully expended and what remains is the urgent, slightly reckless momentum of a man who needs to convert the asset before the environment changes. I know this phase. I have seen it in every major fraud case I ever worked. It is the most dangerous phase, and it is also the phase where they make the most mistakes. I look at the papers on my table, and I let my shoulders curl inward, the posture of a woman diminished, a woman who has arrived at the end of herself. "All right," I whisper. He leans over me. The gold cross swings forward. I have been watching that cross for days now, using it as a gauge of his proximity, a pendulum marking the invasion of personal space, and it stops 6 inches from my face, catching the kitchen light, performing its function as a prop. "You know, Martha," Gary says, and his voice has changed again, settling into something new, something I haven't heard from him before, the register of a man speaking to someone he no longer needs to manage. The voice of genuine contempt, unshielded by performance, the thing he sounds like when there is no longer a purpose served by the mask. Arthur wasn't a hero. He says it with the easy, dismissive authority of a man stating a fact about weather. He was just a man with a pension and a wife too stupid to manage it. A man who, frankly, made my work very easy. He straightened slightly, the cross swinging back. "I'm doing the world a favor by erasing his name from these accounts. Simplifying things. Moving on." He laughs. It is dry and brief and carries in it the specific tonality of a person who has been containing private amusement for some time and is finally in a position to let it out. My steel blue eyes are very wide. My mouth is slightly open. I am the picture of a woman being told something crushing and not having the internal resources to respond to it. Behind my eyes, I am making an assessment. He has just told me, without coercion, without prompting, in a room with operational cameras that his own people installed, that he considers himself to be engaged in erasure. That the cover story of "protecting her assets" is, at this stage of his confidence, a discarded wrapper. That he is, functionally, a man who has chosen to confess his intentions to the person he has victimized because she is, in his calculus, so completely without power that the confession carries no risk. Narcissism, pathological. At the terminal stage, it becomes not just a character flaw but an operational liability. I file the observation. He thinks his arrogance is the armor of a winner. In my experience, arrogance of this specific type is the most reliable entry point I have ever found in 40 years of finding entry points. I am going to walk through it. I take the pen. This time, the tremor in my hand is genuine, not the performed tremor of the past weeks, but the actual, physiological response of a body under sustained adrenaline load, the fine shake of a woman who is 72 years old and has slept very little and has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. I acknowledge it, note it, and do not permit it to affect my grip. I sign the deed. Martha Vance. The signature is close enough to my normal hand to be authenticated. Small variations under stress are expected and, in a forensic analysis, actually serve to confirm authenticity. Then I move to the insurance authorization. The routing fields are standard ACH format, 9-digit routing number, account number, payment type code. Gary is watching the pen move across the signature line on the deed, the notary is logging the seal. Neither of them is watching the routing fields. I fill in the first 8 digits of Gary's routing number exactly as written on the document in front of me. In the final position, I input a compliance error sequence, a specific combination that reads to the naked eye as a valid account suffix but triggers, at the processing layer, an automatic suspicious activity flag. The sequence activates a 48-hour federal hold under standard OFAC review protocols, a mechanism I helped design as part of a counter-fraud advisory in 2018, built precisely to catch the kind of rapid high-value transfer that Gary is about to execute. He is watching the pen. He is not watching the digits. He is thinking about $1.2 million and about being, in his own private accounting, the smartest person who has ever run a game on a grieving widow in Sarasota, Florida. I sign the authorization line. I slide the papers across the table. "It's done, Pastor," I murmur, and in my voice is the sound of a woman who has put down a burden she could no longer carry. In my head, the logic of it assembles itself cleanly, the way a balance sheet assembles when you have found all the irregularities and corrected for them. The moment Gary initiates the transfer from his terminal, his ministry's secure server, as he has specified, which means the transaction will originate from a registered ecclesiastical account that is already under federal observation. The $S3 classification code embedded in the account suffix will flag the transfer for OFAC review. The funds will enter a pending state, visible to Gary as processing, inaccessible to Gary as cash. He will believe the wire has cleared. He will believe, for the duration of the 48-hour hold, that $1.2 million has moved from my account into his offshore structures, and he will behave accordingly, making calls, alerting his network, potentially initiating the next phase of whatever he has planned for my person. And he will do all of this while the federal hold is in place, while the brooch on my chest is broadcasting, while Elena's team is 3 blocks away in a florist van. He is not holding the keys to the vault. He is holding a grenade, and I have counted the pin in my cardigan pocket since this morning. I offer him a submissive, broken nod. It's done, Pastor. Now, we go to the vestry. He snatches the documents with the impatient efficiency of a man who has waited long enough for a thing he has already begun spending in his head. The notary is still recording in his logbook. Gary is not interested in waiting. He gestures to Elena, a short, decisive flick of the wrist that she mirrors perfectly, moving to my side, taking my elbow, helping me upright with the practiced care of a woman whose job is managing fragile things. The florist van. 3 blocks out. We hear you. The ministry's secure server, Gary says, folding the documents into his briefcase with swift, practiced motions. I want the wire cleared before evening service ends. He checks his phone again, checks his watch. The twitchiness of the burn phase is fully visible now. He is a man who has stayed at a table past the point when he should have walked away, and some part of him knows it, even if he won't acknowledge it, and the knowing is converting itself to urgency. I lean on my cane. I drag my feet slightly. I let my shoulders carry the weight of a woman whose spirit has been extinguished, the particular posture of defeat, the posture that says, I have nothing left, and the man beside me took it. I have been performing this posture for a week. I perform it now without irony, because what matters in this moment is that Gary believes I am hollow, and he needs to believe it all the way to the vestry door. We move toward the front hall. I do not look back at the kitchen, at the ledger taped to the underside of the sink, at the bread box, at the 37 years' worth of Sunday breakfasts this room contains. I will look at all of it again. When it is mine again. Just a moment, I say, at the front door. Let me at least look presentable. Gary closes his eyes briefly with the effortful patience of a man who is doing me an enormous favor by not simply dragging me to the car. Martha. Please. My voice is very small. Arthur always said a woman should be turned out properly for the church. He exhales. He waits. I reach into my cardigan pocket. My fingers find the brooch, the cool lattice of it, the slight weight. I draw it out and hold it up, squinting slightly, the gesture of an older woman examining a piece of jewelry in low light. My Sunday brooch, I murmur, as though to myself. I pin it to my silk blouse, over my heart, left of center. The pin meets the fabric and I press it home, the clasp engaging with a tiny, definitive click that I feel more than hear. And then the vibration comes, a single pulse, barely perceptible, the length of a heartbeat, transmitted through the metal into my sternum. Live. I adjust my glasses. I settle the brooch against my blouse and feel, below the silk, Arthur's dog tags warm against my skin. 2 pieces of metal, one from a man 40 years gone and one from a team 3 blocks away, and between them something that resembles, not hope, exactly, which has always struck me as a passive thing, a thing that waits, but readiness. The particular quality of attention a woman maintains when she has done everything she can do and the work has moved into its final phase. I look up at Gary. All right, I say. I'm ready. The Florida humidity arrives like a physical argument the moment Elena guides me through the front door. The air is dense and salt-laden, the sky pressing down with the specific gray amber of a late afternoon threatening rain. Gary's black SUV sits in the driveway, engine already running, the sound of it a low, proprietary growl. Elena's hand on my elbow is steadying. As she lowers me into the back seat, taking my weight with more capability than a care nurse would naturally possess, her fingers close on my forearm and press once, precisely, with a specific pressure that is not incidental. "We hear you. We're with you." Gary folds himself into the driver's seat. The door closes with the dense thud of an expensive vehicle. We pull out of my driveway and I look back through the window, not at the car, but at the house. The plantation shudders. The window where the afternoon sun hits the shadow box at 4 o'clock. The jasmine climbing the left side of the front porch that I planted the year Arthur came home for good and said, "Wherever you put it, that's where I'll be," and I planted it facing south so it would always have sun. I look at it as we turn the corner. Last time a victim left this house. The church announces itself from 2 blocks away, white stucco and tinted glass, for stories of engineered grandeur designed to communicate the specific message that God is available here, and available at scale. The parking lot holds 300 cars. The marquee reads, in confident block letters, "Evening service 7 p.m., Pastor Gary presents, the blessing of abundance." We enter through the back. The service entrance is a narrow corridor of cinder block and institutional carpet, lit by fluorescent tubes that reduce everyone to the same gray-green. Gary moves through it with the proprietary ease of a man in his own building, nodding to a passing volunteer who averts his eyes with the particular deference of someone trained to avert them. The vestry. Dark mahogany paneling that absorbs the light rather than reflecting it. Heavy velvet curtains in burgundy and gold, floor to ceiling, muffling the acoustic of the room until the air itself feels thick. A high-end workstation in the corner, screens off but indicator lights glowing. And everywhere the smell of frankincense, cloying, ceremonial, the smell of a room that has been used for rituals of various kinds for a long time. Through the thick walls, barely perceptible, the choir. Voices in rehearsal, a soft angelic drone, the sound of something beautiful happening in a room where the man curating it has no relationship to beauty whatsoever. Gary locks the deadbolt. The click of it travels through the room and settles, and the silence that follows it is the silence of a room from which exit has been formally removed. My skin registers it. My body notes it. My mind is already past it. He sits at the workstation and his face in the monitor's blue light is stripped of every performance. No baritone warmth, no spiritual authority, just a man in an expensive suit staring at a transfer confirmation screen with the flat, hungry attention of someone counting money. His fingers on the keyboard are fast. He types with the 2 index finger aggression of a man who learned to type for utility rather than fluency, pounding each key as though the machine requires convincing. He turns the screen toward me. Pending transfer, $1,200,000. Processing, 99%. "Look at it, Martha," he says. There is something almost giddy in his voice, the ungoverned pitch of a man who is very close to something he has wanted for a long time. "Your life's work. Your husband's blood money." He says blood money with deliberate emphasis, watching my face. All of it, moving into the hands of someone who actually knows what to do with it. A pause. "And you gave it to me. You signed it away because you were too weak to hold on to it." The progress bar holds at 99%. He doesn't know it will hold there for 48 hours. My heart is doing something I have not felt it do in 40 years of field work, not fear, which I have managed and set aside, but a cold, arterial fury that is perfectly, surgically focused. The fury of a woman who has listened to a man describe her husband's life as blood money and who has been carrying Arthur's dog tags against her skin since the morning of the funeral and who will not, who has never, in 72 years of living, permitted the last word on a subject of this magnitude to belong to someone other than herself. I stare at the screen. 99%. Wait, I tell myself. Not yet. Let him finish. Let him build the whole structure. He rises from the chair. The casual, deliberate way he does it, pushing back, rising to his full height, crossing his arms over his stocky chest, is the body language of a man who has just completed a transaction and is now managing the cleanup. The transfer is pending, which in his understanding means done. The documents are signed. The asset is neutralized. What remains is the liability. He looks at me across the vestry, and his eyes are flat and utterly empty of the warmth he has been manufacturing for weeks, and for the first time I see Gary without any of his props, no honeyed baritone, no gold cross light catching, no bespoke suit doing the work of projecting blessing. Just a man with cold eyes standing in a locked room. "The wire is clearing, Martha," he says. His voice is conversational, unhurried, the voice of a man discussing logistics. "And once it does, I think you're going to have a very unfortunate, very accidental fall in this vestry." He says accidental with the specific inflection of quotation marks, because at this stage he does not need to pretend. Grieving widows do it all the time. The coroner's very understanding about these things, in this county. He watches me to see if I understand what he is saying. I understand what he is saying. The trapdoor beneath my feet has been here since we walked in. I felt it in the click of the deadbolt, in the thickness of the velvet curtains, in the frankincense that fills a room designed for secrets. He has been moving me toward this room, toward this moment, since the first afternoon he sat in my living room and said the state is a cold machine, sister. The lever is moving. I can feel it, in the particular quality of his stillness, in the way he has stopped performing anything, in the flat, administrative finality with which he has announced my death to me as though it is a scheduling note. I look at him. I look at the door, locked, one deadbolt, the kind that requires a key from both sides, a detail I noted when he threw it. I look at the audio console on the far wall, its inputs and outputs, the system Gary spent $40,000 on because the blessing of abundance requires high-quality sound. I look back at Gary. And I reach up, slowly, and touch the brooch over my heart. "Gary," I say, and my voice is quiet and clear and carries in it none of the tremor, none of the widow's thin uncertainty, none of the performance I have been giving for weeks. Just Martha. Just my voice, at full measure. Before we conclude, I adjust the brooch, my fingers finding the lattice, the vibration beneath my fingertips telling me everything is live, everything is transmitting, the team is 3 blocks away and whatever happens in this room is happening in multiple places simultaneously. "I'd like you to tell me something." He tilts his head. The flat eyes register surprise, and then reassessment, and then something that might be the first edge of uncertainty. "I'd like you to tell me," I continue, "exactly how you did it. All of it. From the beginning." I fold my hands in my lap, the posture of a woman with nothing left to lose, which is exactly the right posture for a woman who has already won. Call it a confession. I think you've earned one. His chin lifts. The narcissism finds its footing immediately, reflexively, the way a plant turns toward light. I watch the decision move across his face. And I wait. I sink onto the velvet-tufted bench. The motion is deliberate and calibrated, not the controlled lowering of a woman who is choosing to sit, but the slow, gravitational collapse of a woman whose legs have finally given out on her, whose last reserves of something essential have been spent. I let my hands fall open on my knees. I let my shoulders round into the posture of a person who has stopped holding themselves up. "Please, Gary." My voice breaks on the second word. A clean, precise break, the specific vocal quality of a person who has been fighting to maintain composure and has just, in this moment, stopped fighting. I have produced this sound before, in depositions, when I needed a subject to believe he was watching a woman come apart. The technique is physiological. You loosen the laryngeal muscles and permit the breath to arrive slightly ahead of the phonation, creating an authentic quaver without losing projection. It works because the emotion driving it is real. The fury beneath it is as clean and cold and enormous as anything I have felt in 72 years of living. The quaver is just the pressure finding a crack. I look up at him, my eyes wide, the steel blue of them reflecting the low vestry light. "I don't understand how I was so wrong about you. How did you do it?" How did you get the children to turn against me? A pause, the pause of a woman gathering herself. How did you find Arthur's files? I watched the question land. I watch it move across Gary's face the way weather moves across open water, the dismissive curl of his lip, the squaring of his shoulders, and underneath both of those the thing I have been banking on since beat one of this entire operation, the reflexive, irresistible gravitational pull of a man whose entire psychological architecture is built around the need to be witnessed as exceptional. He cannot answer this question with silence. A narcissist cannot leave an audience without a performance. I am the audience. I am, in this moment, offering him the one thing he has wanted since he walked into my living room, a witness to his own brilliance, a person who will finally see him clearly, who will finally comprehend the scale of what he has accomplished. I let my lip tremble. I wait. Gary scoffs. The sound of it fills the vestry, short, contemptuous, the exhalation of a man who has been containing his private amusement for a long time and is finally in a room where containment is no longer necessary. He pushes off from the mahogany desk and leans against it in the practiced pose of a man making himself comfortable in his own space, arms crossing over the gold cross, chin lifting. It was easy, Martha. He says it the way you say obviously. The way you say you wouldn't understand, but since you're asking. He looks at me on the bench, trembling, broken, upturned face, and the contempt in his expression has an almost aesthetic quality, the contempt of a man who finds the contrast between himself and his subject deeply satisfying. You old people, he says, shaking his head with the rueful tolerance of someone explaining something simple to someone slow, you're so desperate for connection that you'll believe a spoofed text over your own blood. He chuckles, the cold, sharp sound I have heard before, the laugh that escapes before the professional mask can catch it. I spent 3 days learning to spoof a phone number. 3 days, Martha. And 40 years of your family trust dissolved in a text message. He is warming to the room now. I can see it in the way his posture opens, the way he begins to move, 2 steps left, 2 steps right, the unconscious pacing of a man who is accustomed to an audience arranged below him, a pulpit, a congregation listening. The debt, Arthur's debt, I forged that myself. Spent weeks on that signature. He laughs again, genuinely, the laugh of a craftsman proud of his work. That little hitch in the V, the way the old man's arthritis changed his grip. Weeks. And you sat right across from me and watched me sign his name and you thought I was doing you a favor. He shakes his head. Your children didn't abandon you. I made them think you were a senile burden who was cutting them out of the will. I made you think they'd abandoned you. He spreads his hands, a magnanimous gesture, the gesture of a man presenting the elegance of a solution. It's really about managing information flows. He looks at me. You weren't a person to me, Martha, he says, and his voice is almost gentle with it, the gentleness of a man delivering what he considers a clarifying truth. You were a ledger that needed to be zeroed out. I am sitting very still. My hands are in my lap. My right hand has found the brooch. My fingers move across the lattice without looking at it. I have been learning its surface by touch since Elena placed it in my palm, the way you learn the face of something important, the way I learned the particular landscape of Arthur's hands. The raised wires. The clasp. The recessed edge along the lower right where the toggle sits, smooth and small and waiting. Elena described it precisely. Slide it to the far right. Full range. That's the PA override. A direct patch into the sanctuary audio system. Bluetooth enabled, high-end, $40,000 of equipment that Gary installed because the blessing of abundance deserves to sound like the voice of God. Gary is still talking. He is describing the offshore routing with the unhurried detail of a man who has been wanting to say this out loud for a long time. The Cayman account structure, the rotation through the 3 shell LLCs, the timing of the transfers that kept them below the automated monitoring thresholds. He is giving me routing numbers. He is giving me account names. He is, in the closed vestry of his own church, delivering the most complete and self-incriminating financial deposition I have heard in 40 years of forensic work. He thinks he is gloating to a ghost. My thumb finds the toggle. I feel a faint hum travel from the brooch through my fingertips, up through the bones of my hand and into my chest, where it meets Arthur's dog tags and the steady, deliberate rhythm of my own heart. Live. The first thing that happens is silence. The choir in the sanctuary, the muffled, angelic drone that has been the ambient texture of this room since we arrived, stops. A clean cut, mid-phrase, the kind of silence that arrives when something has interrupted a system rather than concluded it. Then Gary's voice comes back to us. Not from Gary. From the walls. Bleeding the old bat dry. The acoustics of the sanctuary give it a cathedral reverb, a vast, resonant amplification that transforms Gary's private sneer into something enormous and inescapable, the voice of a man whose words are filling a room designed to carry the word of God to 300 people. Arthur was a fool, and his widow is a paycheck. The silence after it is total. I feel it through the floorboards, not metaphorically, but physically, the particular stillness of a large room in which many people have stopped moving simultaneously. And into that stillness, still broadcasting, still feeding into the PA system with the fidelity of $40,000 of audio equipment. Forged the debt myself. You weren't a person to me, Martha. A ledger that needed to be zeroed out. The frankincense in the vestry does not move. The velvet curtains hang perfectly still. And Gary's words fill the church of Gary, rolling through the nave and the aisles and the balcony, finding every ear in every pew, carrying with them the full, unedited content of a man who has just given his congregation the most honest sermon of his career. He freezes. It happens in stages, the body processing information before the mind catches up, the sequence of physical responses that precede comprehension. First the stillness, Gary going absolutely motionless, mid-gesture, like a man in a photograph. Then the eyes, moving up toward the ceiling as his own voice comes back to him amplified, and in that upward glance I see the precise moment when the brain assembles the data into meaning. His jaw comes open. The color leaves his face. Not gradually, rapidly, a draining, the artificial tan going ashen and then the specific gray-yellow of shock, the color of a man whose body is rerouting blood away from the surface to manage something internal and catastrophic. His eyes come down from the ceiling. They find the brooch. I watch the realization move through him, through his eyes first, then through the set of his jaw, then through the particular way his hands drop from his chest to his sides, the gesture of a man whose armor has just been removed. He is looking at the silver lattice pinned over my heart and he is understanding, in real time, what it is and what it has been doing and how long it has been doing it. He looks at my face. The woman on the bench is not crying. The woman on the bench is looking back at him with steel blue eyes that are not clouded or vacant or retreating behind the polite veil of managed frailty, eyes that are simply, completely, quietly present. Looking at him the way a forensic auditor looks at a case file she has just finished closing. I reach up and adjust my glasses. I think, for just a moment, of Arthur. Of the way he looked at me across the kitchen table on Sunday mornings, over the budget ledger, the look that said, I know exactly who you are, and it is the best thing I have ever known. I hold Gary's gaze. And I let him see me. The monitor chirps. It is a sharp, discordant sound, an alert tone, the kind that a system produces when it has encountered a condition that requires immediate human attention, as distinct from the smooth, progressive tones of normal processing. Gary's head jerks toward the screen. The progress bar is no longer at 99%. The progress bar is no longer a progress bar. Transaction blocked, OFAC restraint, case ref, SR 2024, FL 0089. Contact Federal Oversight immediately. The bar pulses. Red. 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 Gary lunges. His body crosses the vestry in 3 steps and his thick hands slam down on the keyboard with the desperate, pounding energy of a man who has decided that the problem is mechanical and can be solved by force. Keys clatter. The mouse drags. The screen does not change. No. His voice has lost every register of the pastoral baritone. What comes out is raw and high and entirely stripped of performance. No, 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 it's my money, it's cleared, it's cleared. It has not cleared. The $S3 classification code I entered into the routing field, carefully, deliberately, while Gary watched the pen and not the digits, has done precisely what it was designed to do. The moment Gary hit the authorization button from his terminal, the transfer flagged for OFAC review. The funds entered federal evidence hold. The originating account, Gary's ministry server, already under federal surveillance for 11 months, simultaneously triggered the warrant that Elena's team has been waiting to execute. The $1.2 million is not in Gary's offshore accounts. It is in a federal evidence locker, and it will stay there until the case closes, at which point it will be returned to the account of Martha Elaine Kowalski, widow of Staff Sergeant Arthur J. Vance, decorated veteran, man of complete and unassailable honor. Gary is still pounding the keyboard. The screen still reads red. The vestry door announces itself before it opens, a heavy, resonant impact, the sound of something substantial being applied to a lock with deliberate force. The deadbolt Gary threw does not survive it. The second blow takes the entire latch assembly out of the frame, the wood splintering with a sound like a rifle crack, and the door swings open. They come through in layers. Elena first. She has shed the gray scrubs somewhere between the florist van and the church back entrance, and what she is wearing now is a tactical windbreaker, navy blue, federal marshal in gold across the chest and back, the letters large enough to read from the back of the congregation that has gathered in the hallway beyond. She moves with an efficiency that has nothing to do with nursing and everything to do with a decade of field work, crossing the vestry in 4 steps with her hand already at her belt. Behind her, 2 more marshals, church elders in their Sunday suits with the specific pale shock of men who have been sitting in a pew listening to their pastor confess on the public address system, an APS investigator I recognize by the county lanyard, and Leo. Sarah. My son's face is the color of a man who has been running, flushed, eyes too bright, the expression of someone who received information that contradicted 48 hours of constructed reality and drove to a church in Sarasota at speed. He has his phone in his hand, held out, the live stream of the evening service still running on the screen, because the sanctuary system was streaming, as it does every Sunday, to the church's YouTube channel, and everything Gary said in this vestry went out to the internet with the same clarity it went out to the pews. Sarah's face is wet. Her phone is pressed to her chest. When she sees me, standing, which I will address in a moment, she makes a sound that is not quite a word and starts moving. Mom. The wall Gary built does not fall. It does not crumble. It evaporates, in the moment Sarah says that word, in the moment Leo's face rearranges itself from shock into something that is recognition and relief and 48 hours of fear releasing all at once. The entire constructed architecture of isolation and manufactured estrangement disappears the way a false entry disappears from a ledger when the correct figure is entered, cleanly, completely, as though it was never there. I stand up. I do not use the bench for leverage. I do not reach for my cane, which is leaning against the wall where Elena set it when we came in. I place my feet flat on the vestry floor and I rise with the deliberate, unhurried verticality of a woman who has been choosing how to move for the past several weeks and is now, for the first time, simply moving. My posture straightens. Not the performed straightness of arthritic effort, the natural straightness of a woman who spent 4 decades in government service and before that was raised in a household where you sat with your back away from the chair and stood like you meant it. Gary is behind his desk. He has stopped trying to override the federal hold. He is looking at the screen, at Elena, at the door, at me, in the rapid, cycling gaze of a man who is trying to identify which direction the room has left him any room to move, and discovering that there is no such direction. The audit is closed, Gary. My voice is steady. No tremor, not the performed absence of tremor, not the effortful suppression of it, but the actual, baseline steadiness of a voice that has nothing left to perform and nothing to suppress. My voice in its natural register, which is lower than the widow's voice and quieter than the frightened woman's voice and clearer than either of them. I look at him across the vestry. I've reviewed your books. I've tracked your forgeries. I've documented the asset transfers, the spoofed communications, the forged signatures, and the manufactured evidence against a decorated veteran who served this country with more integrity than you will ever understand. I fold my hands in front of me. I've found a significant deficit in your character, Gary. It's time to pay the balance. He opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. The baritone has nowhere left to go. Elena does not hesitate. She crosses to Gary with the focused, economical movement of a professional executing a procedure she has performed many times, and she takes his arm, and she turns him, and she puts him against the mahogany desk, the desk he used as a stage, as a throne, as a prop in the performance of his authority, with enough force to make the items on its surface shift. The handcuffs are out before he stops moving. The metallic sound of them, the ratchet and click of the mechanism engaging, twice, travels through the vestry and through the hallway and out to the congregation watching through the open door. It is the most beautiful sound I have heard since Arthur's last homecoming. Since the particular sound of boots on the front porch and the specific rhythm of a familiar knock at 4 a.m. after 18 months of silence. Gary is making sounds that are not words. The pastoral dignity, the honeyed baritone, the perfected warmth, the bespoke suit that was supposed to signal blessing and authority, is gone as completely as if it had never existed. What remains is a stocky man in expensive clothes being led toward a door by a federal marshal, his face the face of someone who has run the same calculation many times in the last 4 minutes and arrived each time at the same impossible answer. The congregation watches. I watch. The idol is led away in chains through his own sanctuary, past the pews where 300 people sat and heard his confession amplified to the full capacity of a $40,000 sound system, past the offering plates and the velvet-roped section for ministry guests and the banner that reads the blessing of abundance in letters 2 feet tall. The audit is closed. The Florida sun is extraordinary. I had forgotten, in the gray amber light of the past week, in the controlled interior of my occupied home and Gary's cloying vestry, how uncompromising it is. It hits me the moment I step through the church's back exit, full on my face, the specific weight of late afternoon subtropical light that flattens everything into brightness and warmth and the smell of rain coming off the Gulf, the air dense with salt and the particular green smell of things growing aggressively and without apology. Leo and Sarah are there before I have fully cleared the door. The embrace is not graceful. Leo is taller than I remember or I am smaller than he remembers, and Sarah arrives from the left a half second behind him, and what we form is not an elegant reunion but a genuine one, 3 people holding each other in a church parking lot in the middle of an evening service that has gone significantly off script, the kind of embrace that does not care how it looks because it is not performing anything. Leo's voice is rough. We thought, he stops. Starts again. We thought you didn't want to see us. The texts, you sounded so. I know. I pull back enough to see his face. I put my hand on his jaw the way I did when he was 8 and had a fever, the gesture of a mother locating her child and confirming he is real and present and all right. His eyes are his father's eyes, the same gray-green, the same quality of attention. I look at Sarah. Her face is streaked and she is gripping my cardigan sleeve with both hands, and her phone is still live in her pocket, still streaming, the YouTube comments on the church service probably running to several thousand by now. He was a professional liar, children, I tell them. An expert. He did this for a living, to people who had no reason to suspect it. I look at both of them, and I feel the specific, ferocious love of a woman who has spent a week in isolation and now has her family in arm's reach and can afford, for the first time, to let herself feel the full weight of what it costs to be without them. But he forgot one thing. Leo waits. Your father taught me how to hold the line, I say. And the bureau taught me how to read the fine print. Sarah makes a sound that is partly a sob and partly a laugh, the sound of too many emotions arriving simultaneously, and she puts her forehead against my shoulder, and I hold her, and above us the Florida sky is beginning to move with the first edges of the storm coming in off the Gulf. The numbers never lie. And neither do I. The silver tea service is back in its place. It took Elena's team 6 hours to recover the items from the storage facility where Gary's people had staged them pending auction. 6 hours and a warrant and a jeweler's loop applied to the underside of the silver meat platter, where a small, precise marking sat in the soft metal, a 7, a dash, 8 digits. My FBI badge number. Marked bills. My heirlooms as instruments. The forensic marker I etched with a sewing needle while my fingers bled slightly had done exactly what marked evidence does. It created an unambiguous chain of custody between the theft and the thief. It had been, the APS investigator told me afterward, the cleanest piece of field evidence documentation she had seen in 11 years with the agency. Arthur would have laughed. He would have said, "Only you, Marty." Now I sit at my dining room table, the silver service at my left, a fresh cup of Earl Grey steaming at my right, and in my hands a manila folder. Gary's forgeries. The evidence against Arthur, the redacted military records, the manufactured notations about misappropriated property, the entire constructed paper architecture of a shadow cast over a man who had no shadows. Elena has the digital scans. The originals are not needed for the federal case. The federal case has more than enough. I have kept them for this. I strike a long wooden match. The sound of it, the specific scrape and catch, the small percussion of the flame taking hold, is clean and simple and final. I hold the match to the corner of the first page, and I watch the flame move across Gary's careful forgeries, the manufactured evidence curling and blackening, Arthur's invented shadows becoming smoke. The paper burns quickly. I let it burn in the silver serving tray, the tray with my badge number on the underside, which has earned a different kind of use tonight, and I watch the ash accumulate, pale gray and weightless, the physical residue of a lie. Arthur J. Vance. Staff Sergeant. Purple Heart. 43 years of marriage. Sunday school. Little League. The wild roses his mother grew in the yard in Ohio. The particular quality of his silence when he was working through something difficult. His honor is not a claim I need to defend or a legacy I need to protect. It is simply a fact, as immovable and inarguable as any number in any ledger I have ever balanced. Gary spent weeks manufacturing a shadow. The shadow is ash. The man is whole. I watch the last of the paper curl into nothing, and I do not cry, and I do not speak, and the smoke rises clean and white toward the ceiling of my dining room, which is mine again, which has always been mine, which smells of Earl Grey and the jasmine coming through the open window from the porch. The storm is coming in from the Gulf. I can see it from my porch chair, the specific atmospheric quality of a Florida evening storm, the way the clouds build in columns to the southwest, the light going amber and then copper and then the deep, burnished gold that precedes the dark. The air is cooling. The humidity breaks before a Gulf storm in a way that is almost generous, a brief promise of relief before the rain. I have a fresh cup of Earl Grey. For minutes steep, the bag removed precisely, a small amount of honey, the Tupelo variety, local, the kind that Arthur used to bring back from the farmer's market on Saturday mornings with the specific satisfaction of a man who has found the exact right thing. My leather-bound ledger lies in my lap. I open it to the final entry, the last line of the last page I will use for this case, written earlier this evening in the kitchen by the light of the overhead lamp, in my small, precise, perfectly slanted hand. Deficit resolved. Assets secured. Ledger balanced. I read it once. I closed the ledger. On the street below the porch, my neighbor's sprinklers run their evening cycle. 2 houses down, a dog is barking at the coming weather with the earnest, repetitive alarm of a dog who has not yet made peace with the fact that storms arrive regardless. The jasmine on the porch rail is blooming. It blooms heaviest before rain, the scent of it almost excessive in the cooling air. I am a petite woman in a silk blouse in a porch chair in Sarasota, Florida, with a cup of tea and a closed ledger and the quiet, unhurried quality of an evening that belongs entirely to me. To anyone driving past, and occasionally someone does drive past, slowing at the sight of the federal marshal's vehicle that is still parked at the curb, the APS investigator's car behind it, I might appear to be a retiree enjoying the evening air. A widow. A pleasant, small woman with white hair and a slight tremor in her hands, watching the storm come in. The dog tags are in my pocket. They will go back on the shelf tonight, in the shadow box, where the afternoon sun catches the Purple Heart at 4 o'clock. The brooch is on the kitchen counter, waiting to be returned to Elena's team in the morning. The ledger is closed. I pick up my tea and I watch the first lightning find the gulf, a long way out still, a flash that illuminates the underside of the storm clouds in a pale, clean light, there and gone, leaving the sky darker for its absence. The numbers never lie, I think, and I mean it the way I have always meant it, not as a professional principle, not as a forensic methodology, but as a statement about the nature of things, about what persists when you strip away the performance and the manufactured evidence and the spoofed texts and the forged signatures and every lie a man tells himself about why he is allowed to do what he is doing to a woman he has decided does not matter. What persists is what is true. Arthur is true. My children are true. And I, sitting on this porch with my tea and my closed ledger and the storm coming in off the Gulf, a woman who spent 40 years catching criminals that better-equipped people couldn't find and spent the last 11 days dismantling one from the inside out with a sewing needle and a cipher and a brooch and the 40-year education of a man who believed in leaving things in order. I am exactly what I have always been. The audit is closed. If you made it to this moment, thank you for listening all the way through. Most people bail before the bill comes due. But here, the bill always comes due. What started as humiliation and disrespect ended with receipts, truth, and a payoff they never saw coming. If you want more stories where karma shows up without mercy, hit subscribe and come back for the next one. Now tell me in the comments, what was the most disgusting thing they did? What crossed the line for you?